Now my great pleasure to introduce our first clinical Pearl speaker. Adrienne Lee is an associate clinical social worker and PPS school-based mental health clinician in the Live Oak School District. Adrienne grew up in Santa Cruz County and is grateful to be serving in her home community. She spent several years volunteering as a responder on the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and as a result, feels a deep connection to the mission of the Calciano Memorial Symposium. Please join me in welcoming Adrienne.
Hello, everyone. I am really honored to be here today. I'm also really nervous. Someone asked me this morning, does you speaking mean that you're interested in public speaking? And I can wholeheartedly say that no, I did not go into social work to be a public speaker. So this is a big growth edge, and I just ask that you bear with me. Like I said, thank you. Like I said, I'm really honored to be here. This cause is really dear to my heart as someone who did volunteer for several years on the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Being able to show up for people during what might be the hardest period or day in their life is something that's deeply meaningful. And I'm really honored to be here amongst all of you. So today I'm really here to bring you into the kind of lived application of what it means to work with young children and to help them build resilience. And I will be telling 3 stories today. And if I had to kind of distill them all down into one sentence, it would be that resilience really grows inside of relationships. I think oftentimes in this work, we can lose sight of that. It's such intense work, and sometimes we forget that the relationship itself is the primary intervention. And when I'm thinking about relationship building with children, I'm really thinking about 2 pieces. I'm thinking about co-regulation, and I'm thinking about unconditional positive regard. When I first began working in an elementary school, I was pretty overwhelmed. There was times where you're going down the hallway and you hear screaming, and you go in a classroom and there's like a kid in a cape on a desk just screaming at the top of his lungs. Or, you are called into a classroom and it's because a 6-year-old was just biting his friends. And with all of that, it was pretty disorienting. And I remember talking to the amazing team that I work with who are here today. I see them and I love them. And I remember talking to them, and they really helped reframe this for me. So I was thinking, oh my gosh, these behaviors are so challenging. Like, how the heck do I get to the mental health needs of the students? And they helped reflect back to me that, yes, these behaviors are challenging, but ultimately this kid is just communicating to you that they don't know how to get their needs met. And that reframe really helped shift my perspective to one of curiosity, to one of empathy, to really wanting to know the why underneath the behavior, because ultimately behavior is communication. So when kids are yelling, or screaming, or threatening, that is just their body's way of communicating that they need help in that moment, that there is an unmet need underneath that behavior. And for children who are experiencing chronic stress or chronic adversity, those stress response systems are sometimes chronically activated, and they can take longer to settle. So in those moments, what becomes most important isn't correction, it's really connection and regulation. And regulation is something that happens first in relationship. So co-regulation is the language of the body, and if it could speak, I imagine that it would say things like, your feelings are not too much for me, we will get through this really hard moment, and I'm going to stay and help you feel safe. It looks like getting down to eye level instead of standing over a child. It sounds like keeping a really calm tone. And it also looks like slowing your breathing. As the adults in the room, it really requires that we check in with ourselves first. We can't go into a room and expect to help regulate a child if we're coming in dysregulated. I really see co-regulation as the foundational step in resiliency. because I don't believe that children can learn and retain and practice coping skills without first feeling safe. And this leads me to my first story, which is the story of June. June came into my office through our school's universal behavior screener. This is one of the most important tools that we use for early intervention with students. It really helps our mental health team identify students across the behavioral spectrum. So students who are at risk for both internalizing and externalizing behaviors will show up on the screener. And on paper, June looked like she was thriving. She has a really strong academic record. She hasn't missed school this year. She's never had an office referral. She's a student who, had we not done the screener, might have slipped under the radar. So on the screener, her teacher did note that she appeared to be withdrawn and anxious. And because of that, I brought her into my office and I met with her and I asked her how she was doing. And she just immediately said, "I'm fine." And that's a very common answer that you get with students and adults as well. You know, the first few sessions were all about building rapport. So we're just playing games, we're doing art. It's very low pressure. I'm just trying to show her through the way I'm showing up for her that I am a safe and trustworthy adult in her life. And in the meantime, I'm connecting with her family. That's a really important part of the work that we do in schools, is we always reach out to families too to learn more and try to partner with them. And so I connect to June's mother, and I learned that her parents have really been experiencing stress for a long time. There's financial strain, there's substance use in the home. The parents' marriage has been kind of rocky for a long time. And then very recently and tragically, a family member had died by suicide. And that had really rocked the whole family's world. And June is just holding all of this inside. Her response to all of this is that she really wants to be perfect. She doesn't want to create stress for her family. And I am now holding all of this information when I'm meeting with her, but I'm not ever pushing her. I'm just letting her know that I'm there if and when she's ready. And one day she comes into my office. She walks straight over to the emotions chart, and she starts selecting emotions. She selects scared, frustrated, hurt, sorry, sad, sleepy, guilty. She looks at me and she says, "You know, I think I felt all of those the week that my aunt died." There are moments in this work when something shifts. You really feel the trust deepen, and it feels like a door opens. And I know that many of us in this audience know that feeling. From that moment forward, our work together really expanded. When June came into my office, she was able to name how exhausting it was to try to be perfect, how confusing it was to not know what she was feeling, because she was so used to holding it together for the adults in her life that she often had no idea what was going on inside of her body. So together we began to practice how to identify feelings through sensations in our body, and then we also began to talk about, what are things that make me feel good, that make me feel calm? If I'm feeling sad, how can I feel better? We began to explore all of that. But the most important intervention with June was not the tools, it was our relationship. During a time in her life when the adults were really overwhelmed by their own stress, the space in my office and our relationship was predictable, it was calm. It was a space where she could really begin to learn, to breathe, to settle, and learn more about herself, her own strengths, her own challenges, and her own needs. And that leads me to the second pillar of the work that I do, which is unconditional positive regard. So unconditional positive regard is a framework developed by Carl Rogers, and it's the practice of non-judgment and complete acceptance of a person. I like to think of it as the ultimate champion, and if it could speak, it would say things like, "You are worthy exactly as you are, and I will care about you no matter what you say or do." When I think about resilience, I'm not thinking about how many coping strategies a child knows, how many types of breathing they can do. I'm really thinking about their identities. And I believe that resilience strengthens when a child knows what really matters to them, what they're good at, and what makes them feel alive. Their values, strengths, and interests become anchors that carry with them throughout their lives, no matter what's happening in their life, no matter if their families are unstable or their worlds are unpredictable. When adults are able to offer unconditional positive regard to children, it allows them the emotional safety to explore their identities, to take risks, and to make mistakes. And this leads me to the story of George. So George is a third grader who I've worked with for the past year and a half. Last year when I first met him, he was very frequently dysregulated. He would come to school, and within 30 minutes of being there, I'd kind of hear crashing from the classroom, and I'd go over. And George would be kind of tearing through the room, throwing things, yelling, and he was struggling with staying emotionally regulated. When it was time for counseling, he would look at me and he would roll his eyes and he'd be like, "Kindness, jail, really? Again?" Like, he was over it. He was not having it. During our sessions, he called himself a bad guy, and he would frequently explain that that meant that he needed to punch people's lights out and basically tear through the school. And so one day he is tearing through the school. He's breaking things. He goes into the front office, and I get a call. And I show up to support him, and his way of telling me he's really, really angry that day is saying, "I'm gonna kill you." And this is him drawing a picture of him doing that. So in that moment, I remind myself, this is not the time for correction. This is the time to connect, to help model regulation. So I'm checking my own nervous system, I'm slowing my breathing, I'm trying to keep my tone really neutral and steady. And I stay about 5 feet away from him because I know that George really does not like to feel cornered or trapped. And I just let him know, I can see you're really, really frustrated. I'm here when you're ready. I've got you. And I just stay there. And, eventually he does calm down. And the next day he comes to school and we're able to reflect on what happened. And I separate him from the behavior. That's really important. I let him know those were really unsafe choices. I don't say that you were out of control. And I let him know I've also seen you make really safe choices. Like, I absolutely know you're capable. What do you think you could try next time? And over time, with consistency, his ability to regulate began to grow, and his view of himself began to shift. This year, George loves to come to counseling. He says that he wants to be a super, super, super kind friend. When I asked him yesterday what he would like me to tell you all, he's like, "Make sure they know I'm really strong." And then he flexed. When I had him create this identity map a few weeks ago, he quickly, under 10 seconds, listed out kind, funny, smart, handsome, big brain, tap dancer, hip hop. And then he's like, really handsome. He went back to handsome. He's like, "I'm really handsome." The child who once thought of himself as a bad guy now thinks of himself as all of these things. He has learned to work through the hardest of days, and he always tries again after mistakes now. Seeing his resilience has been the greatest gift. And it's really important to note here that his parents have been very involved and on board. They're very supportive and they're very resourced, and this is not the case for many children. And that brings me to my final story, which is the story of Ivan. He's a 4th grader that I work with, and he's a student who comes to school in a state of chronic dysregulation. The adversity levels at home are very high. When we looked at Dr. Bush's slide on, the consequences of a score of 4 or more, if you think about that and hold that in your mind, Ivan scores an 8. Progress with him looks really different. Over the past year and a half, it has been a lot slower and less consistent. There's been a lot of regressions, and you really have to look closely and pay attention to see the ways in which he's growing. Recently, I was sitting on a bench with him waiting for his mom to pick him up, and we were reflecting on the day, and he's like, yeah, today, you know, I was really mean, but I didn't punch anyone. And I'm like, yeah, that's amazing. Like, Ivan, you're crushing it today. Yeah, and for him that was growth, and it was really worth celebrating. When a child has experienced high levels of adversity, I think of their emotional landscape similar to desert soil. It's been stripped in many ways of the nutrients that it needs to survive and really thrive, and that could have happened over a period of many years. If you plant a seed in the desert, it's not going to grow overnight. It will need just enough water, the right conditions, consistency, and patience. Growth will be slower, but that doesn't mean that that growth isn't happening. If you really pause, if you look closely enough, if you bend down, you will see it. My concluding reminder is that resilience doesn't grow from pressure. It grows from patience and presence. My hope for all of us who work with children, including myself, is that we can hold the Junes, the Georges, and the Ivans with the same unwavering and unconditional support. Thank you.
All right, with that, it's now my pleasure to introduce our next clinical pearl. Zach Bauman is a licensed clinical social worker and clinical director of special programs at PVPSA. Zach is a former school teacher, ballroom dance instructor, and professional modern dancer. Zach has been instrumental in growing the crisis team at PVPSA. She also oversees the Kids Corner program, providing supervision and placement of master's level interns, and is passionate about working with youth and their families. Please join me in welcoming Zach.
Wow, it's really bright. And I feel like I'm here this is a difficult time because it's right before lunch. So if you could just take a moment and maybe like stretch your arms or take a deep breath in, because I know that you all have been sitting and we've heard some amazing things, but I think we need a moment to just like honor we've been sitting for a while. So let me get to my slides. Give me 1 second. Sorry, we're gonna go through his slides to get to mine. There I am, okay. I almost wore that shirt today, but I didn't. Okay, so my goal today is to give you, hopefully, a piece of, an intervention that I like to use with my clients. I wanna give a little shout out to where I learned this from. It was from a playful EMDR training that was given by Anne Beckley-Forrest and Annie Monaco. And even though I'm EMDR trained, you do not need to be EMDR trained to be able to use this tool. So I just want to put that out there. I think that this is a great activity to do once you've already built rapport with your client. So you've had a good amount of sessions, your client trusts you, and you're feeling ready to kind of figure out what are some of the things that we need to work on, which can be kind of scary. So we're going to move to our next slide. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways of presenting this intervention. And the first thing that I need you to understand is what a rock is. So if you look up there, it kind of explains it. So a rock is basically things that you've experienced in your life. Again, our presenters earlier shared some really big examples, whether it's trauma, someone close to you being sick or dying, someone hitting you, DV in the home, parents yelling and fighting. I also really will always put out there if you've been touched inappropriately or sexually, because we never know who's had those experiences. So we understand that rocks are these experiences that we've had in life that are really difficult. And so the first way to present this intervention is what's called the bowl of light, and this comes from a Hawaiian story or myth that everyone is born with this beautiful light that shines. And then we have these experiences in life, these rocks, that end up covering that light. And so then our light is dimmed and we're not shining as brightly as we could if we hadn't had these life experiences. So, you guys are going to be my clients. And I'd love if you will find a piece of paper. I know that there are some cards on your table. And I feel like if you see how I might use this intervention, you're more likely to understand it, as well as to be able to use it with your clients. So, grab a piece of paper for me. When I do this, I like to work with an iPad, so I do it on an iPad. For my older kids that want to draw, I have them draw their bowl. The example up there are, the one on top was a bowl that I copy and pasted from an actual client session. Handwriting is mine. But you can do it like actually get a bowl, actually get some rocks, and do it with them if they're really tactile. I have a lot of ways to do this activity. So everyone have their paper. I can't see because the light is so bright. Everyone's got their paper? Okay, awesome. So I will tell you the story of the bowl of light, that we're all born with this light that shines so brightly, and we have these experiences in our life that have made things feel really hard. And I want you to share with me, what are some of those rocks? What are some of those experiences that you've had that are making life difficult? Now, when a child comes in, I know a little bit of background about them, right? I know maybe that they've experienced loss, or maybe they have had an abuse. So I will throw those things in when I'm maybe giving them a sample of things to choose from that they might put as rocks. So I'm going to ask you, what are some rocks? What are some things that have happened to you in your life that make things feel really difficult and hard for you? And I'm going to ask you right now to put some of those rocks in there, and I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Sorry, it's very bright. So you keep working, and I'm just going to kind of talk as you do that. For kids that are really young and they don't want to write, I will write for them. I will have them choose rocks that are really, really large, if it's something that was big, rocks that are small, if it's something that was bothered them a little bit but not a lot. I also let them know, I'm not going to ask you for any details. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. I want to know at what age did this happen to you, and I want to know how disturbing is it. So on a scale of 1 to 10. And then I'm going to take those scales, and I'm going to ask you those 2 questions once you've created your rocks. Shake your head if that makes sense. Yeah, so I don't want to go into details. I don't want to bring up trauma. I'm just trying to understand what are the experiences they've had in life that have been difficult. So I'm wondering if someone would share with me if they want to shout out, and then I will repeat what it is, a rock that they have that they wouldn't mind sharing. Yes? Okay, so we've got teenage pregnancy. I'm not going to respond in any way like, oh gosh, that might be hard. No, I'm just going to say, how old were you? 17. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how disturbing is that for you? 10. And then I'm going to go on to the next one. Someone else have a rock they want to share. Yeah. The death of a parent. Can you tell me how old you were? 7. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how disturbing was that? A 10. Okay, so we've got some big ones right now. You might have clients that are giving you these little ones. That's okay. This is an activity that I'll come back to over time, maybe as we get more comfortable and I feel like rapport has built even more. But I'm very, very clear that I'm not going to go into details. So if you look up on my slides, I've got the age and then the level of distress. If I have little kids and numbers are really difficult to understand, I'll have them, did it bother you this much, or was it really, really disturbing? So I'm going to use this kind of scaling and allow them to use their arms to explain that. So the idea is, why am I doing this? There are a couple reasons. One, I want to know, again, what are the things that we're going to need to work on, or hopefully that we'll get to. Also, when kids come to therapy, someone has made them come. They're not walking in on their own accord. Some of my teenagers do, but someone has shared information, and kids don't always know what that information is, and that causes a lot of anxiety. So this way, fairly close or to the start of therapy, we're going to get out there some of the things that we might want to address, And that reduces their level of anxiety, so they're not always wondering, oh my gosh, what does the therapist know? What did my mom share with them? Right, so this is a great way of kind of reducing that level of anxiety. Yes? Okay. Once we do that, we have our list of rocks. I always keep it, again, I use it on my iPad. If they're doing it on a piece of paper, just make sure that you keep it or you take a picture of it so that you can come back to it. And then I let them know, because I always want to be like client-centered, we're going to come back to these when you're feeling ready. And we're going to try to make those rocks get a little bit smaller so that your light can shine a little bit brighter. Now, there's another way of presenting this that's maybe a little bit more concrete. If the idea of a bowl of light doesn't work for you, and for some clinicians it doesn't, here's another concept, which is, what are the things that you are carrying around with you every day that impact the way that you engage with yourself, the way that you impact, or the way that it impacts you way you engage with others? So I'm looking at what are these things that are really hard that you are dragging around with you every day? So again, if you don't like that idea of the bowl of light, I encourage you to try this. I'll do it exactly the same way. I want to know how old you were and then how distressing it was. Yes? Okay. So now, I never want to leave a kid in this place, even though we've not gone into detail. These are difficult memories. Even the two that were brought up, those were big, level 10. So I want to go to my rainbows. So kind of like what we just talked about, like if you go to sleep, the doctor was just sharing, if you go to sleep thinking about these bad memories, it is going to impact how you sleep. So we brought up these things, even though we've not gone into detail, and I want to put you in a more adaptive network. I want you to be leaving my session thinking about the positive things in your world. So I'm gonna have you, and you can do it on your piece of paper, and normally I have like lots of colors, and I'll ask, what's the first color of the rainbow? Red, right. So I want you to go ahead and draw your red ray. And I want you to think of something in your life that brings you joy, that brings you peace. It could be a favorite pet, a time that you were at the park with your mom that was so meaningful. It could be a favorite vacation, a toy, a favorite food, something that just brings you joy. What are some of the rays in your life? And so I'm going to have you do that right now. And you can keep doing your rays, but I'll just keep talking. Unlike the rocks, where I am not going to go into detail or ask questions, with the rainbow rays, I'm going to really allow them to dig in a little bit more deeply. We're going to try to get more into that adaptive network. And I will do one ray at a time with them. So I'm wondering if someone will share with me what their red is, or one of their rays. Yes?
Working out.
Working out. Oh, tell me a little bit more about what it feels like when you work out.
Whenever I'm dealing with something stressful, I'll just go to the gym and just push weights and think about it. Eventually goes away.
Yeah, so I can see for you that working out is a way for you to cope with stress. It seems like it makes you feel really good. And I'm going to go on and kind of get them into a space where I feel like they're doing really like, they're sitting in that, they're really feeling good about themselves and they're happy. And then we will move on to the, thank you for sharing. And then we'll go on to the next one. So we're going to do our red and our orange and yellow and so forth, and we'll do all of our positive things in their life. Are there times when kids struggle with the rainbow? Surprisingly, no. It's amazing. Kids find these really beautiful memories. And then because I am trained and do a lot of EMDR work, I really believe in the bilateral stimulation. So again, you don't have to be EMDR trained to do this, but once we have those rainbow, and I might do it with each ray, I'm going to have them do their butterfly hug. So I'm going to have you all put your hands right here. Yeah, and I want you to think about, you can think about your entire rainbow, or you can think about one of those rays, and if you were my client, I would just talk you through it. So I'm gonna use the gym one, and you're gonna slowly tap right hand, left hand. Good, so for my friend over here, I would say, For you, working out is so important. You feel a lot of autonomy. It gives you a space to work out everything that you need to. You feel really good when you're done. You feel accomplished. And it's such an important aspect of your taking care of yourself. And you do a really good job at doing that, right? And then we would take a nice deep breath in, and we would let it out. Yeah, so I would do that with their entire rainbow, and I would just go, and I've written these things down, or they've written it down, and I've got it. And I'm gonna just really get them into that really positive, adaptive network. And then it's not that they've forgotten those rocks, because those rocks sort of live with them, but it also reminds them of this really beautiful part and these beautiful experiences they've had in their lives. And again, I love the bilateral stimulation. It can be done like this. You can have them moving their feet back and forth like they're walking. They can tap on their thighs. We want that tapping to be really slow. For EMDR, the faster we tap, that's for negative things, but for positive and trying to get both sides of the brain working together, where we're really going to use that nice, soft, slow. Anyway, if you have any questions, I hope that you will ask them on a card or come see me throughout the day, but thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Our next clinical pearl, Steve Perez. Steve Perez is a dedicated school counselor and a community advocate with over 25 years of experience in Santa Cruz. He has attended almost every one of the Calciano Symposium, and we're delighted to have you here, Steve. Thank you so much for coming.
My name's Steve Perez. I'm a counselor for Santa Cruz City Schools. I did a lot of social work in the community, gang intervention prior to this, and when I was told that I was going to be working or interning at Santa Cruz City Schools, my heart just dropped. Just like everyone else was saying, like Dr. Dahl was saying, I had such a so much trauma in schools, and I just felt unseen. I was a troublemaker. I was an ELD student. I didn't speak English until first grade. I felt like I didn't belong, and as a result, I really acted out. I got in a lot of fights, suspended, did some juvenile hall time in high school. And so when I was told that I'm going to be interning at Santa Cruz City Schools, I didn't want to do it. I was like, I want to do something cool. I want to work for Barrios Unidos, or I want to work for Dominican Hospital, or I wanted to do something else. But then I realized that being in schools was probably the best thing that's ever happened in my life. All right, so here's a slide. Again, I'm kind of going with it. This is all our counselors in the county. We have counselors who are working from Scotts Valley, from PVSD, Santa Cruz. We also have counselors from, I said Scotts Valley, Pajaro Valley, and some from the County Office of Education. So we're doing a lot in schools to support students. Our goal here is primarily to help students become resilient. Let me get my shows. These are mental health counselors. They're located in the high schools and middle schools. They're awesome, and they're beautiful. So they're great. So not only are we meeting with students, we are focusing on pushing into classroom settings. We're helping teachers provide awareness. We're providing education about mental health. We support families by assisting with referrals, child welfare support. We also help with attendance issues, behavior concerns, academic progress, and we become the liaison with community organizations. Ultimately is just advocate for students' rights. This is Miss Soli's room. So we also offer clubs, and Miss Soli's room and my room are always filled with students. I'm going to show you the next slide. The next slide here. This is my office. The bell hasn't even rung yet. It's 8:20, and I always have students who are hanging out and lingering and wanting to connection. And I believe that when I was in high school, I really wanted connections with an adult, and I wanted to be seen, and I wanted to be heard. and I wanted someone to believe in me. And I think my role now is multidimensional, and sometimes it is just showing up. These students might not have any issues, they might not have anything, but they want to just hang out with an adult that believes in them. And that goes a long way. We also offer wellness centers at our high schools. This is Harbor High School. We also have a wellness center in SoCal High School and working on one at Santa Cruz High for next year. Gary, he is amazing and I've heard a lot of great things. It's very busy in there, but they offer support. Gary's also has an advisory student that will be working on teen first aid for the upcoming years, so they will be trained in providing peer support. Okay, I'm not even gonna look at my notes. It's like, the mix is too much. So one of the ways that we are supporting students, or we're finding students, aside from students walking in or having drop-ins with their teachers or referrals from their parents, is that we do the social emotional health survey. And it's something that we provide for students in grade 6 all the way to grade 12. It's a 39 questionnaire that looks at their resilience and some coping skills. So we might have a student who has low self-esteem, but has a lot of positive supports in their lives. They could be part of the Boys and Girls Club, or they could be part of a soccer team, or they have an extended family, but they might feel horrible about themselves. And vice versa. We have students who have positive health, but maybe they're in the foster care system, or maybe a parent has passed away. So the students that we're really looking for are those students that have neither low feelings of self-worth, as well as low coping skills and positive reinforcements in our lives. As a result, it asked 39 questions. Some of the questions, for the example, question 31, you can't read it, but I'll share it with you. It says, the teachers at my school treat me fairly, is one of the questions. And the students just input what they think. And you can't see this, but it says that our highest rate of students who don't feel that people support them at school are Native Americans, our African American, followed closely behind by our Latino population. And another question that we have here is, during the past month, how often did you feel that you had warm and trusting relationships? And again, our Native American population, our Native Hawaiian population, and our Latino students had the biggest need. This also goes for, I have another slide that it's not here, but I have another slide that shares our information about our LGBTQ plus students. And it's very similar, just feeling connection and wanting to be seen and wanting to be heard at schools. Okay, I'm gonna skip the next two because and then finally at the last question, one of the questions is, do you want to see a counselor? And those students could be really high up, and so we know from this that we're going to end up checking in with those students as well. Just like everyone said before, middle school is rough. Like, it's tough. Like, I have friends who are, who are not part of education that ask me, like, what? Like, they can't. When I tell them I'm a middle school counselor, they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." How? They give me the hugs. And then I have other students who are like, other adults who are like, "Well, thank you for your service." I'm like, well, yeah, sure, I'll take that. I'll take that. And it's true. It's hard. It's and kids are, as we learned from the previous people, that students really struggle in middle school, and there is definitely a need for mental health support. So I didn't share this before, but I had the privilege of working on 3 different levels. I worked at elementary at Westlake, I've worked at Harbor High School, and then now currently at Mission Hill. And one of the things we do provide at the schools are mental health pop-ups. And so this means that we're inviting people from the community to share, to hand out brochures, resources, and just provide support. And the ultimate goal is to provide kids to get them, to graduate. I think of fine art, and I think my fellow counselors, mental health providers who work in the schools will agree that it's difficult. We want to provide support for students. However, a lot of kids will come into my office And they'll have a tear maybe, and they're like, oh, I need to check in with you. And I'll think to myself, well, I just saw you walking with your friends during lunchtime, having the best time of your lives, and now you want, right when science starts, you want to come see me. I was like, and excuse my language, but I was that kid, and I know what's kind of happening, so you can't really BS a BSer, so I can see what's happening. But it is important. One challenge is knowing what students need, what kind of support. We have some students who are really struggling, and we want to dig deep in the school setting, and providing mental health is really important. But just as we were saying before, it's difficult to bring them back in a container and then be off to take a test in science class, or to be able to be a present for a math project or a history project. And so it's become, as I say, kind of like drive-by therapy. It's like some kids will come by and we'll do quick check-ins and then bring them on their way, And we've definitely seen a huge success in schools by having this kind of support. And finally, students who are loved at home come to school and learn, and students who aren't come to school to be loved. Most of my work sometimes is just listening to kids, hearing them out, learning about things that, personally I might not care about, but I know everything about surons, and I know everything about, doing wheelies, and it really, they feel heard and they feel felt, and that ends up going a long way. What you can do as privateers and outside organizations is, if you have a student that you're working with in therapy and you're concerned about them, 9 times out of 10, so are we. So please, do your ROIs, your release of information, reach out to the school counselor, work with us. We want to work with you as well. If you have an organization, or you're part of an organization and you want to do a presentation at school, we're happy to host you. Just keep in connection with us. Okay, thank you.
With that, I'd like to introduce our next clinical pearl. Carissa Lopez is a licensed marriage and family therapist. And we get her picture up, there we go. And is certified in dialect behavior therapy. She is an access clinician at Santa Cruz County Children's Behavioral Health, integrating DBT with trauma-informed, strength-based care to support young people in building skills for sustainable recovery. Please join me in welcoming Carissa.
Hi, everyone. It is really bright up here, Zach. How many of you have known a young person, a student, a child, a loved one, a friend, or maybe even you yourself, that was going through an emotional or behavioral crisis severe enough that you ended up, or they ended up in the hospital? Can't really see, okay. Yeah. And how many of you wondered when they came home, now what? What are the next steps? That question is exactly why I'm here today. And thank you for introducing me, but my name is Carissa, and I am a licensed marriage family therapist with Santa Cruz County Children's Behavioral Health. And I've built a program specifically designed to answer that now what. Before I get into the program, let me briefly explain to you guys what dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, actually is. DBT is an evidence-based treatment that was originally founded by Marsha Linehan, and it was developed for those that were struggling with severe emotional regulation problems. And it's also divided into 4 main modules. Number 1 is mindfulness, which is the act of being present without judgment. And the second one is distress tolerance, the ability to be in a crisis without making things worse. Number 3 is emotional regulation, understanding one's emotions and being able to manage them. And the last one is interpersonal effectiveness skills, which is learning how to communicate healthily, setting boundaries, and maintaining one's own self-respect. And for adolescents coming out of a psychiatric hospital, building skills is exactly what they need. So what does coming out of a psychiatric hospitalization really mean? What that means is that there was a youth or adolescent that was going through a behavioral or emotional crisis severe enough. Maybe they were having thoughts of harming themselves or someone else, or they were unable to be kept safe at home, where they were then taken to a psychiatric hospital, where they were then stabilized and taken care of. They're kept safe, and then they're discharged usually within a week, and then they come home. And that's where the gap is. We know that the days and the weeks after coming home from a hospitalization is when the risk for a crisis returning is the highest. There's often a wait to get back into outpatient therapy or to get additional services, and families aren't sure what to do during this time. The teen returns to the same environment that contributed to the crisis in the first place. So the urgency that got them the initial help starts to fade right when consistent support matters the most. So I wanted to fill that gap, and I created this 6-week DBT skills program specifically for, I just realized. There you go. For adolescents coming out of the hospital, designed to catch them in that window while they're still motivated enough to engage and to give them and their families real tools before the moment passes. So here's my program. It is 6 weeks, and throughout the 6 weeks of treatment, we first start out with a pre-screening phone call, and then we go through all 4 modules of DBT within 6 weeks. Their sessions are 90 minutes, and the youth comes in with their caregiver every single week, and together we work through all the modules. And we end with dialectics, which is the idea that 2 things can coexist, that change and acceptance is there. That it can be true at once. The structure is intentional, so each week the homework builds off of itself. So they start out with mindfulness, and they're practicing mindfulness, and then the next week they're practicing distress tolerance along with mindfulness, and the week after that they're practicing mindfulness, distress tolerance, and emotional regulation, etc. So that by the very end they're practicing everything. They are actually learning concrete skills and tools that help them to grow and to be the version of themselves that they want to be. That final session is their therapist actually attends, and so we coordinate together and work on what, I'm also nervous. We work together to develop a plan and utilize their DBT skills for an ongoing crisis plan so that we're all speaking the same language. So every session also has a PHQ-9 or a GAD-7, and for those of you that don't know what that is, a PHQ-9 is a 9-question measurement tool that measures the severity of depression symptoms, and the GAD-7 is the same, but it's actually measuring anxiety. So the higher the scores, the more severe the symptoms. And now for a case, I was working with a youth that I will call A, and she was 14 years old. This was her first hospitalization. She had been there because she had cutting behaviors and was having some suicidal thoughts. And when she came home, she did have an individual therapist, and that therapist connected her to my program. Her family was unfortunately unable to participate in the program, but she showed up every single week by herself and was there willing to learn to practice the skills. So at intake, her PHQ-9 was 13, which shows moderate depression. And by week 3, when the emotional regulation skills came online, that's when I noticed her scores dropping. And at the end, she was at 5. At the end of the 1-month follow-up, she only had a 5. So that's an overall 62% reduction, and she did all that without her family there, which was really striking to me, just her internal strength and motivation. Coming to what I actually learned from this and what I have found was actually helpful. So the first one is doing a chain analysis in the first session. Before we teach a single skill, we do the chain analysis, which is of the event that led to the hospitalization. A chain analysis is essentially a detailed map of the crisis. We talk about what led up to it, all of the thoughts, the feelings, the behaviors in between, so that we can really understand the crisis. We do this together, the teen and the caregiver, and for many families, this is the first time they've actually sat down and understood the crisis itself. We haven't argued about it, we're not avoiding it, we're actually understanding it. And what this does is it sets a tone that we're going to be honest in the room. The second one is the caregiver in the room. So skills generalize faster when parents learn alongside teens and see themselves as part of the solution. When the parent learns the skills, the whole environment shifts. When the parent is feeling involved, if they're feeling not involved, they might be afraid or feel that maybe they're part of the problem. But when they're participating, they feel better. And so essentially inclusion kind of lowers fear. The next one is cumulative homework. I already mentioned this, but essentially, having that repetition, the layering, the reinforcement of the skills week by week is also really helpful. And having what is called a diary card, which is essentially a tracker, is also really helpful too, because then the teen, or really whoever is practicing the skills, gets to then take home their diary card, and they get to see how much they've grown over this entire time. And additionally, collaborating with the therapist, that's also been really helpful. Basically, maintaining that DBT language so that the youth can continue practicing the skills in their treatment as they go on to graduate. And I really do believe that's a meaningful part of why the outcomes hold. And my last one is measuring every session, really being able to point to some numbers saying like, this is where you were and this is where you are now is genuinely powerful, especially for a youth or young person who may think that they're not succeeding or they're not making any progress. So that's been really nice. And the number that I am really the most proud of is 0 so far, so I'm really excited about that. Yeah, thanks. 0 youth that have completed the program so far have been back to the hospital, and ultimately I want to just end talking about A again. I mean, she was 14, it was her first hospitalization, and shortly after completing the program, she graduated from counseling altogether, and she did all that really all by herself too. She's the one that chose to keep practicing the skills outside of counseling, and I'm really grateful to be able to have worked with her. And whether you're a clinician, a teacher, a parent, a student, or someone who cares about young people, the takeaway is the same. When a young person comes home from a psychiatric hospitalization, the moment is not the end of the crisis, it's an opportunity. And what we do in that window matters enormously. Thank you.
Up next, we get to hear from Dr. Dahl one more time, and we need to thank Dr. Dahl for this concept of having the clinical pearls come after the science. So he used this in effective grand rounds, and I know that we've been able to see the effectiveness of this today. So welcome back, Dr. Dahl. Thank you so much. There's a good picture of you.
Oh, let's turn that one off. I don't need the slides. We can turn them off. So I've been reflecting about sharing some clinical insights. I had spent about 20 years doing a lot of clinical work and a lot of CBT and a lot of training clinicians, designing interventions, and thinking about what helps us be effective. And what I want to do to pick up, I think, a major theme from this entire experience today is I want to focus on this idea of the relationship that began early in the presentations and that Adrian Lee really engaged us to feel about and think about. And I want to add, I think, what was implicit in that consideration, which is a relationship that can nurture and support a clinical intervention, a behavioral intervention, helping someone, supporting someone, isn't simply a relationship, it's a caring relationship. And caring is a word that can mean caretaking, and if we're good in our work, we are doing a lot of caretaking behavior, and that's very important. But there's another dimension about caring, and that is, it's a feeling. It's a motivational feeling. It's a connecting feeling. And the difference between saying the right words and doing the right behaviors and landing an authentic feeling can be like night and day. I can say, or a parent can say to a 14-year-old, I really admire how hard you were working on those math problems on your homework. Or a parent can say, wow, you made that video? Okay? That is like night and day. The first one is, oh my God, my dad wants me to work harder on algebra because he thinks math is important, trying to control me. They're not saying those words, that's the feeling. And the second one is, oh my, like, that landed because it was authentically, I was impressed. I can't believe that I'm creating that video. The difference between saying the right words and landing the right feelings, we're not brilliant actors. We have to feel the feeling, right? We're not going to fool anyone, not the least the incredibly tuned bullshit detectors of most young people. And so having those authentic feelings ourselves are the only way we're going to be able to make our facial expressions and tone of voice and posture be convincing. And when we care, and again, it's the listening, it's not just the behavior, it's having the feeling. And I want to also acknowledge something that's come up a couple times in this conference and symposium, which is the sort of overflow of feelings. A number of us have had tears or have had feelings that are hard to control, and yet that has value. That's part of how, it's because we care. It's because what we're sharing feels vulnerable, but that's where so much of the action is. And so I think that sometimes we work so hard in a self-conscious way about doing the right thing, we're focused on ourselves. When we're caring, we're focused on what's going back and forth, listening and sending. So I want to move from that general framework about this feeling-based sending and receiving that creates the connection authentically to a very pragmatic clinical pearl insight. About 4 years ago, I got, in a very short period of time, pulled into being on a video panel about a week after the war in Ukraine broke out. And I was connected to a group of people that were communicating to provide support. It was such a shock when this happened, of just trying to provide some help dealing with the stress that was going on. And there was a whole network of people who were doing this sort of webcam. And one of the things that came up was that their kids and their adolescents were so stressed and weren't able to sleep. And when your country is being invaded and attacked and your entire life is being turned upside down, you have air sirens going off, the sleep disruption quickly became something practical they wanted to focus on. But there was a second part of this, which is that there was a lot of stigma about mental health. And this was a program we developed over a number of months. In fact, parts of this are still going on to support young people in Ukraine dealing with all the stress of what's happening and the displacement and the trauma and the loss. But there are two pragmatic issues from that work, from our team that have been doing this. And one is that the stigma against mental health in Ukraine was very, very high. To talk about mental health disorders or challenges was not a good way to get traction. What was very salient to young people in Ukraine was resilience. Being resilient in the face of being invaded and being in a war was something admirable. Sleep doesn't have to involve mental health. If sleep supports resilience, then helping young people with their sleep helped them with their resilience. And we had a really wonderful uptake of their interest in learning how to improve their sleep to help their resilience. And now the second part of this was this, as we talked about earlier, how do you activate positive feelings to create the feeling of safety and lowering your vigilance when your country is being torn apart, you have threatening things happening all the time, you have a lot of negative events. To try to focus on something positive, it seems phony. It feels inauthentic. It feels the opposite of authentic feelings. However, there's this wonderful stress researcher who's developed a lot of interventions for stress, initially with families losing family members with serious illness, Ahmet Sood, and he had this frame of uplifting moments. In fact, he would talk about helping people, even under really bad circumstances, make sure they got rest and uplifting moments. RUM, rum, was like taking a sip of rum. And he would joke about that, but then the key issue of this uplifting moment is no matter how terrible things are, you can find uplifting moments. Even if it's a transient improvement, even if it's someone doing something kind or sharing a piece of music or seeing somebody be kind to someone else or helping each other, having authentic uplifting moments are actually amplified when there's so much negativity. And then what became clear for doing this intervention and helping them develop these healthy sleep habits, as well as identifying uplifting moments and replaying them at bedtime, was having the older adolescents teach the younger adolescents how to do this. And they would introduce examples of uplifting moments, and they were authentic. They knew how bad things were. They weren't trying to gloss over how bad things were. They were trying to help shift attention, focus, and engagement with real uplifting moments and the uplifting feeling of helping others do that. And so I think sometimes these subtle, nuanced aspects that create the connection, that create authentic feelings and sharing them, even under dire, negative, difficult situations, are a path into creating those feelings, creating a transient improvement in how we feel, creating connections between people, and being resilient. Thank you very much.